Hi, everyone. Welcome to an author reading for Continual. My name is Beth Dolgner, and I write paranormal fiction and nonfiction. And today I'm going to be reading you an excerpt from Sweet Dreams. This is the first book in the Eternal Rest Bed and Breakfast Paranormal Cozies. This series is set in the fictional town of Oak Hill, Georgia, where our heroine, Emily Buchanan, owns a bed and breakfast in a haunted Victorian home right next to a cemetery. Emily's best friend Sage is a psychic medium, and so the two of them they help solve murders by teaming up with ghosts to track down the clues. So in the scene that we'll be reading from today, Sage has just tried and failed to have a seance with the ghost of a young woman who was strangled to death. And as we join the scene, it's Sage and Emily sitting around with their friend Reed, who is actually the sexton of the cemetery. And Emily is actually thinking about the fact that she talks to ghosts all the time, and yet the ghost of her late husband has yet to show up to talk to her at all. And she's lamenting that he doesn't seem to be around. Emily let the conversation between Sage and Reed fade into the background as she thought back to the days leading up to Scott's death. The crash had been completely unexpected, of course, but strangely unsurprising at the same time, almost as if she had anticipated it. Her therapist had said it was just shock, but Emily wasn't sure she agreed. The feeling of Sage's body stiffening next to hers snapped Emily back into the present moment. Sage jerked forward in an effort to put down her wine glass, her hand shaking so badly wine sloshed over the rim. She brought the bottom of the glass down to the table, but her fingers remained tightly locked around the stem. Emily called her name as Sage's eyes, staring straight ahead, widened with panic. She made a low, gurgling sound. Emily felt her own panic rising as Sage began gasping for breath. Her mouth made little O's as she tried to draw in air, but it was clear she couldn't breathe. "Stop it!" Emily screamed to the empty air around Sage. "Please, stop it!" Reed stood and leaned over Sage, putting one hand on her back and reaching out with the other. His fingers splayed. "Stop hurting her right now," he said in a commanding tone. "We know you were strangled. We have already received this message. We can't help you if this is all you can show us." Suddenly Sage coughed, and her chest heaved as air began to fill her lungs again. Her voice was raspy, and so quiet Emily had to lean in to hear her. "Paper," was all she said. "Paper?" Sage's hand had finally released its grip on the wineglass, and she made a circular motion with her fist. "Right." "Oh, hang on, I'll go get it." Emily got up and ran into the dining room. Sage's pencil and sheaf of paper for automatic writing had already been packed into the bag that held her seance tools. Emily pulled them out and hurried back to the parlor, placing the loose pile of paper on the coffee table in front of Sage, not paying attention to the spilled wine that began to stain the edges of the paper red. She pushed the pencil into Sage's hand. Sage immediately began to scrawl on the paper, forming letters with big, looping handwriting. The tip of the pencil never left the paper. As the page began to fill, Emily peered over Sage's body, bent in trance-like focus, to see the words, "It's him," written over and over in one long, continuous chain. When the first page was filled, Emily hastily snatched it away so Sage could begin writing on the blank sheet underneath it. But it was still the same words. "Is him the man who murdered you?" Emily asked, her eyes darting around the room. The words didn't change, and Sage continued writing at a feverish pace. "Can you tell us his name?" Emily tried. Still, no change. "Reed, you got her to stop strangling Sage, or whatever that was. Do you want to give this a shot?" Reed repeated Emily's questions before surprising her with, "When you say it's him, do you mean me?" Emily's head snapped up to look at Reed. What kind of a question was that? It apparently didn't matter, since Sage continued scrawling the same words. Sage was busy covering the fourth sheet of paper when her pace began to slow. Eventually, she made a final M and stopped, slumping forward so far her forehead touched the paper. "Well," she said, her voice still cracking and quiet, "at least the ghost finally showed up to talk." So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. You can find this book as well as my others online at bethdolgner.com. You can also find everything on amazon.com in paperback, Kindle Unlimited, and audiobook. Thank you so much for joining me, and see you next time. Bye.